look at the body graph, there's 9 centers, 64 gates, and 36 channels. So we're going to start off with the 64 gates. And so the 64 gates originate with the Chinese I Ching. We have a really fun series coming up that I've been working on. We're going to deep dive into the I Ching. So don't worry about learning too much about it now. Just know those 64 gates originate with the I Ching, and we'll go deeper later. And so the 64 gates, it's the number before the decimal on either side. So if you're looking at the left side, it's that 10, it's the 15, the 55. On the right side, you have the 25, the 46, the 24, etc. So gates are the bigger numbers, 1 through 64, that are before the decimals. And then they're also the numbers on the centers that show potential activation. So here we have the throat center highlighted. And so that 62, the 23, the 56, any of those on that center, as well as any of the centers. This is where the gates show up. Exactly. So
it's important to notice that in the centers and the gates, they stay the same, just in case anybody has a question. They stay the same. So they're always the same numbers in each center. That's what gives a nice fixedness to the body graph that we can now apply to everyone else.
Perfect. Thank you for bringing that up, because I know people wonder that.
I've had that before, yeah.
Oh yeah, I've seen that a lot, where people are like, wait, are yours in a different place than mine? No, when you're looking at that body graph on these centers, those numbers are all in the same places, and then it varies person to person where it's lit up. Here we have what is called a hanging gate, and that's where you have the gate, but it's one side that's unconnected. So we have it circled at the bottom where you can see the 27, the 54, the 38, the 58. Any of those are hanging gates where it's like you have the one side reaching out, but it's not connected to the other side. And so you can have hanging gates on a undefined center, like we have over here on the root center. They're just hanging off of there.
They get called dormant because they're on an open center. That's actually the name for them. They're hanging gates. They become dormant because they're in an open center, meaning they're awake intermittently, right? Your open center gates aren't always there pounding away at your life. They're intermittent. So we call that dormant. Ra called it dormant in his first class.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's definitely like I've heard that term, but it's not something I've gotten used to using all the time. So yeah, it's a dormant gate when it is a hanging gate on an undefined center. And then you can also have hanging gates on defined centers. So here you can see it off of the identity center, that 15, that 2, that 46, even the 10. Those are hanging gates on a defined center. And then when a center is defined by a channel, it's 2 gates are connected that form a channel. So the 25 meets with that 51 and they're connected, and then it lights up both centers. It colors them in. And so you can see it's defining 2 centers. So when 2 gates meet up, they make a channel, and then it defines the centers, and now they're colored in.
And it's important to recognize that when the channel gets formed, it does 2 things. It doesn't matter if it's formed by a red gate and a black gate, or 2 reds or 2 blacks, or vice versa. It just doesn't matter. It's about it being formed, A. And B, when it is formed, now that's a reliable life force. You call this a life force in your body because you can dang well guarantee this is a huge driving force in your body. You'll always be that thing. The thing that we can then describe out of this channel, or out of any channels that you have, are a life force.
I love your little like extra touches.
You gotta have it.
It's perfect. Yeah. That's where you get your definition.
Yeah, and it's important to just, recognize all that. So it doesn't matter what's hanging or what's defined. What matters is that you recognize the things that they are.
Precisely. And so an undefined center is when it's white. So all the ones circled up here, the head, the ajna, the throat, all the white centers, they're undefined. Anything white in your chart is undefined.
And it doesn't matter if there's gates in it or not. It just means totally undefined, meaning totally open, or undefined with hanging gates, which means that center will have a few themes we'll talk to, just to help those people who are looking at this graph wondering what's going to be next when they learn to read charts and stuff. So, but open is open. An open center is an open center.
Yeah, and just to further clarify that, because there's oftentimes where people like the difference between undefined and open, and they're kind of used interchangeably. Undefined and open are kind of used interchangeably, and then completely open. So if you look on this example, the head, the white triangle that's pointing up at the very tip top, that is completely open. There's nothing, all 3 of those gates are just like open and ready to receive. Whereas the downward pointing triangle, the ajna, that has 3 hanging gates. So they're all undefined. It's just when there's something hanging off of it. It'll be undefined, it'll be open, and then completely open is when it's just the white shape and no little tendrils, no gates hanging off of it, like the head or the throat center in this example.
Yep, completely open. A fine distinction gets drawn at a later time regarding them, but now you know these are open centers. They're not broken. They're open.
Yeah, they're just receiving.
Yeah.
So, and then a defined center is when it's colored in. So the yellow identity center and that red will ego center, they're defined, so they're colored in. So when anything's colored in the chart, whether it's a gate, a channel, or a center, it's defined.
Yeah, that definition is important because everyone's like, I don't have a lot of color. I have more color. I have less color. It doesn't matter. It truly doesn't matter. All charts are perfect. But the only way to get a center colored in is to have a definition or a life force between it and another center. So a life force can only exist between two centers, not within one center. That's so rule. And only a life force can create a defined center, a center that is now defined and always active.
Perfect. And the 9 centers evolved from the 7 chakras in 1781, just as like a side note. We do have a future episode. We're going to go into it from the 5-centered Neanderthals into the 7-centered humans into the 9-centered transitory species that we are. But I just wanted to bring that up of why are there 9? I've heard of the chakra system. What is that connection? So basically, we just evolved from 7 to 9 in 1781.
It's worth looking at one thing when we talk about the chakras. Will this the only slide on chakras mostly?
Yeah, pretty much.
Oh, so look right up the center of the chart. It looks like the old 7-center chakra system.
Mm-hmm.
That's an important point to make because really the old 7-center was like a stick.
Mm-hmm.
It was phallic-y, just on purpose, take
Mm-hmm.
it that way. And it's 7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But we grew wings. We expanded, a lot less phallic-y. I mean, this is the yin and the yang, realizing time to, be both instead of one or the other. And so a pulling apart took place. So that whole heart center and the 7 centers sort of became two things. And that spleen and stuff it pulled apart.
Mm-hmm.
And it gave us a much greater. So basically, the 9-centered was the 7-centered. It's not like a brand new form in a way that like we threw out every last aspect of whatever the 7 centers were, and now we're 9 brand new centers. No, we're 2 new centers making something completely different, right? But it still encompasses the old 7 centers and it changed them. So we are different, incredibly different.
Perfect. Thank you for that clarification.
Mm.
So just to point out the centers, first up top, the white triangle pointing upward is the head center. It's about inspiration and asking questions. Then the white triangle pointing downward is the ajna, and it's receiving those questions and it's like processing a mental answer.
Awareness.
An awareness center, thank you. And then the throat center is the white square, and that's about expression into the world. It's about the creation, the manifestation into the physical. Then we have the identity, or it's also called the G center, and that's the yellow diamond right in the center, and that's about love and direction. Then we have the spleen, which is the white triangle on the left side. This is about health and wellness and timing. And then we have the will, or it's also called the ego or the heart center. That's that red triangle, and that's about worth and it's the will and self-worth and like putting yourself and putting your heart into the world. Then we have the sacral, which is the white square towards the middle bottom, and that is life force creation. That is your generators and your manifesting generators. That's their energy. And then you have the solar plexus, which is the white triangle on the right side. And the solar plexus that's your emotional wave. That's the ups and the downs and finding that emotional clarity.
Awareness in an emotional wave. It's just really cool. We'll talk about it more.
Oh, yeah, thank you. And then we have the root center, which is the white square at the bottom. And that's the adrenaline, that's the pulse, that's the starting something new, go energy. And so then we have the motors. And so motors in the chart, it's those 4 that are circled in that little purple highlighter. And that's the will center, ego, heart center, the sacral, the solar plexus, and the root center.
Yeah, these motors, they obviously move us, and you don't need a motor to move. just FYI. Motor isn't good or bad. It's just one of the aspects that we apply to the various, as we're reading your chart. Yep.
Absolutely.